Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh. Sorry. The guest is causing problems.
Sorry, guest is coming.
To our Zoom attendees, we're having a slight technical issue. There, sorry. No problem. All right, and we need to welcome our guest, Karen Peterson. Give us a preview.
Here to cause problems, yeah.
I'll be overstayed or welcome.
We will be hearing from her soon, and I think that's it for guests this morning. We're gonna start off with a little bit of our Rotary Minute this morning will be Andy and Vince talking about some recent work they've been doing on projects and grants. And then we'll hear from Sally for an inspiration.
Thank you, President Susan. So the short version here is when my dad died many years ago, in the obit, it gave people an option to contribute to, like many obits, entity A or entity B. Entity A was the Williston-Richmond Rotary Club. And thanks to many generous friends and family members and contributors, a sum of money was obtained, and over the many years, it's appreciated a little bit with some investment help from the board of directors. But there has come a time when it's burning a hole in the Rotary pocket, and some or all of that money needs to get moved. So I approached Todd Goodwin, the Director of Recreation and Parks in Williston, and I said, "Hey, Todd, if Rotary had, say, $20,000, is there something that you could do to benefit the town and its citizens?" And so we've been talking about improvements to several of the parks around town, the Village Community Park, Brennan, and Rosignol. So Todd and I have been in some discussions about what those improvements might look like. So the general takeaway here is that if it works out, we'll have a $15,000 to $20,000 investment into the town. And the idea hopefully is, with the town's and Todd's permission, Rotary will get some recognition in the community for the good deeds we do. I think it was Elizabeth that had a pretty cool idea. Rotary has what are called Peace Bowls. So, we get a little bit of Rotary branding. We would be allowed to physically work on these projects, although I don't know that it's a ton of work. The town would have a contractor and do this and that. So that's sort of a high level view. And then I got contacted by Vince and the grant committee, and I'll turn it over here.
Thanks. So that whole thing is hard to follow. So, yeah, grants.
That will make it hard.
Yeah, as the newly formed Grants and Donation Committee, Charlie McGill advised that there are district grants that we can go for. And I don't know if this club's ever done one or hasn't done one in so many years. So Sherry and I went to the training so that we're certified to do it. The deadline is actually tomorrow. So the way that this kind of works is you're putting your request in for next year, for the 24-25 year. And there is a matching up to $4,000. So we are submitting Andy's project, the nickel project, for this for $4,000. I have everything signed. We're all good. I will say that Sherry and I have been working really hard with the help of also Leslie and Sally. We have 2 other grants. Those grants, if they're $1,000 or less, do not need to be matched by the club. So we are putting in for a need for the Williston Food Shelf, which is 20 large trolley rolling carts that people use to, especially if they don't have a vehicle, and they need to get from point A to point B. And for the Williston Community Justice Center for some baby bags, sleeping bags, and some tents. So everything's signed, and I appreciate it. So I'm going to turn.
I will try to follow up. I should have mentioned that the total sum that the club has is straight out $25,000. So what we don't spend here, if this community playgrounds project works out, we would still have anywhere from 10, maybe 10,000. I've talked to Todd about an additional contribution from our club for scholarship money for kids that can't afford to attend the town programs. So we could earmark some additional sum of money for, Rotary scholarships or scholarships at community. We may still have some more money left. So if anybody, the grants committee or others, if you have projects that, we can brand Rotary a little bit or do work and it's somewhere around 5,000+, keep the ideas coming to the board or to me. Thank you.
So I just think that we really owe Vince and Sherry a huge round of applause and appreciation because they have worked their butts off. They just had the training barely 2 weeks ago, I think, and just got these ideas and yeah.
In lieu of applause, you can give a happy fine.
Oh, wow. But anyway.
He got trained.
Thank you very much. This is a great effort and hopefully we'll, see one or more of these grant requests fulfilled. And Sally.
So I've been thinking a lot about mercy this week and justice. And you'll be relieved to know that I am not going to read you Portia's mercy speech from the Merchant of Venice. I was going to, but. So I want to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story. It's about a homeless man at the food shelf. So maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, a young man came to the food shelf who was homeless. Now I don't know where he came from. He's an young American man who's a Muslim. And he made some plans when he came here. He had enough money to get a short membership in a gym so he could take a shower. And he had enough money to rent some storage space so he could store some things he owned. When he came to the food shelf, he said the only two things he didn't have covered was food and money for laundry. So I gave him a roll of quarters and we gave him some food. He came back fairly often. He was living in a tent somewhere in Williston. I never did find out and it wasn't my business. But he got a job, which he didn't like because they lied to him about how much they were going to pay him, but he kept the job till he found another job. He stopped coming for a while. And then I saw him about 3 months ago. He has an apartment. He didn't like the apartment because the walls are thin and he can hear everything his neighbors do, but he's got a place to live. And now he's gotten hired by FedEx. So he not only has benefits and a good income, but they're going to pay for him to get a CDL. I just want you to know that our homeless people, almost all of them have a plan. Some of them are more equipped than others to realize their plans. Some are pretty well educated, some are not, but they all have a plan. And they look to people like us to help them make that plan a reality in any way we can. All I did was give a roll of quarters and some food. So don't get me wrong, I didn't help this man with a leg up, but he had his initiative and he's now not homeless and he has a job. So there's your inspiration for today.
Thank you, Sally. And now, Walter, I'll turn it over to you.
So today our guest speaker is Karen Peterson. Seacology is a Berkeley, California-based nonprofit organization that works only on the world's islands because they are uniquely vulnerable. In the last 500 years, 80% of all recorded extinctions occurred on islands. Island communities face constant pressure to explore their natural resources, but if a community wants to preserve its forest or sea, Seacology makes a grant, something the whole community needs, like a school, solar power or help with ecotourism. Seacology helps island communities prosper by protecting resources. Karen has been with Seacology since it became a staffed organization in 1999 and has been working on international conservation issues for nearly 30 years. She has experiences ranging from small-based organizations to world-renowned foundations and has worked with all aspects of nonprofit administration and management. Karen's primary responsibilities at Seacology include managing the Dominican Republic National Mangrove Initiative, as well as work in Africa, Sri Lanka, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Karen is a graduate of Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, where she received a bachelor's degree in creative writing. After over 3 decades in the West, Karen has returned home to her home state of Vermont, where she is enjoying hiking, trail running, Nordic skiing, and horses. Okay, Karen Peterson.
Thank you, Walter, for the great introduction and for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to see you all. And let me just get my presentation going here. I was working on this presentation as late as 7:30 last night, so hopefully, okay, can you?
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, I can turn behind me and look and see. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about islands and why ecology does what it does. And as mentioned, the extinction crises that have faced this planet have disproportionately affected islands. It's just, they're the canaries in the coal mine. Pretty much any vulnerability is magnified on islands because they're so small. In the US alone, 28% of extinctions have been on the mainland, 72% in Hawaii. And globally, there's this little tiny island off Australia called Lord Howe Island. It's had more avian extinctions, bird extinctions, than all of the Eastern Hemisphere. And it's just, this biologist said, one of the swiftest and most profound biological catastrophes in Earth's history. So at this point in time, especially with the climate crisis, islands are just incredibly vulnerable. And so we decided to focus on them, protecting island biodiversity, but also island communities, because there's so many rich and diverse cultures. There's such strong ties to the land, to the water. So we work closely with island communities to identify what they need, what they see as the future for their communities. And so we work all over the world. We passed 400 projects last year. 1.4 million acres have been protected as a result of our projects. And we operate with field representatives who are based in the countries where we work. We can't sit in the US and pretend to know what a community needs. And like Walter said, a lot of times it's something as simple as a school, a solar electricity system. Water is a great need. I know Rotarians know about the needs for water internationally, in Africa especially. We've provided a lot of water systems. But I'm going to just show you some examples of the different types of projects we funded. We also concentrate on all kinds of species, be they orangutans in Malaysia, Indonesia, to sea turtles, South America, Central America. So it really depends on the climate, but I'm just going to focus on the projects that I work with because they're obviously nearest and dearest to my heart. And I have kind of a weird portfolio that's all over the map, literally. But right now I'm mostly focusing on the Dominican Republic. And we have a national mangrove initiative there. And mangrove forests are coastal forests. They're those trees that look a bit like they're on stilts. And they're at the intersection between land and sea. They're nurseries for fish that go out to populate coral reefs. Incredibly important for bird species and also to protect coastlines in the event of really catastrophic weather events. And that's becoming more and more important. in the DR, there's been so much focus on tourism that they've destroyed a lot of mangroves to make resorts, et cetera. So this is basically a campaign to sort of help change the image of mangroves a bit, because a lot of people think of them as like smelly places full of mosquitoes, and they can be full of mosquitoes, but they're so important to maintaining the coastlines. So we bring people out into the mangroves, people who have lived in the DR their whole lives, but haven't experienced the mangrove forest, the birds, just the beautiful ocean, and to see what they're all about. But then we also bring the mangroves into classrooms. Costumes are a really big thing. We do manatee costumes, iguana costumes, parrot costumes, and the kids just get really into it because it's just a change from, the day-to-day classroom work. We've done contests with, take some trash and make it into a sea creature. And one thing I'm really proud of is, as a result of this project, as part of a survey that was being done in the mangroves, there was a new species of reptile that was identified. So it's like brand new species that, wouldn't have been identified other than through our project. And then we have an associated project called Play for the Mangroves. And this is where we use mangrove conservation and education as a tool for getting kids to get out into the mangroves, learn about them, go back to their parents, go back to their communities and talk about mangroves. Kids are crazy about sports in the DR. I mean, there's more Major League Baseball players coming out of the DR than the US, right? So we do baseball. We also do volleyball because volleyball is really important to girls there. We do cleanups, and this was just last month. No, it was earlier this month. I was in the DR, and that's our team. And that on the left there is our field representative in the DR, Leda. But we were at some mangroves watching some planting taking place. These are the kids, they get uniforms, they're really into the uniforms. It's really great to see. And then we do ecotourism and also just economic development projects. This is a beekeeping group, and they are the de facto guardians of the mangroves in their area. They've marketed their own mangrove honey. It's been a really successful initiative and just kind of helping provide an economic benefit from conservation. This is a kayaking business that we help support, where fishermen have bought kayaks and they're doing kayak tours in a national park. We help them reconstruct their office that burned in a fire. So that was the benefit we provided for them, but they are basically, and this is an amazing place where the original Taino indigenous people of the island of Hispaniola lived. So this is a really important cultural area as well, beautiful intact mangroves. And that was also a couple weeks ago. We went kayaking through these mangroves and it was amazing. This is a seagrass project. Seagrass is also an associated ecosystem that's very important for carbon sequestration as well as fish. And so a lot of it is awareness. A lot of it is people saying, well, I didn't know what is seagrass? Like they just didn't have any idea. So we do some beautiful interpretive signage. And all this is done, when I say we're funding it. Okay, we're finding local partners to actually execute the projects, because that's what works, is when you get the local people really invested. This is a library that was just inaugurated when we were there, and it's just this beautiful, it's got these beautiful murals inside of the sea life, and just another way for the kids to kind of see what's around them that they can't see, that's under the water, but a source of pride for them. And these murals that every day they're reminded of the beauty and the wonder of their environment. Another place I've worked a lot is Sri Lanka. Very different. But again, mangrove. This is a mangrove museum that we constructed, that we funded the construction of. This was our largest initiative ever. This was a over $3 million investment in Sri Lanka for the museum and a lot of associated programs. But the museum is still running. There's a kids club. The kids are really into it. It gives them something to do, someplace to go, something to bring home and talk to their families about. A lot of school children go to the museum as a destination for school field trips. They do, on Saturdays, they come and they clean the mangroves. They also here, they're carrying seedlings from the shore to the museum. This was on Monday. This was Earth Day. And they did a paper making workshop. And so paper out of like trash that they found in the mangroves, they took the parts that they could gather for paper or cardboard and made homemade paper, and then wrote poems about why they love the earth. And anyway, it was great. And this is exciting. We just launched this week. This is our Earth Day crowdfunding campaign to save the Sri Lankan leopard. In the highlands of Sri Lanka, there are tea plantations, and those tea plantations are very important for Sri Lanka's economy. But also they stress the landscape, and these are the highest mountains in Sri Lanka. The landscape is very fragmented. So this is a project to create wildlife corridors so that the leopards can move freely along the mountaintops. And there's a lot of snares that farmers use to mostly trap feral pigs. But inadvertently, the leopards do get snared. And they are a critically endangered species. There's only 800 left in the world. So this is a program to get kids involved. It's a youth guardians program where the kids learn about the leopards and also learn about the landscape, learn about how to talk to people in their community about the importance of this species and also the watershed itself and keeping their water clean and replanting where they can. And so that's our current crowdfunding campaign. That if you go to I brought some newsletters and fact sheets and some snazzy lapel pins and business cards. So help yourself to anything, please. And Africa, I have Africa in my portfolio just because it was hard to get a toehold there. And now that we have one, I'm invested in keeping it. So we work in Eastern Africa, Kenya and Tanzania, but last year, the year before, we went into West Africa. And now Cameroon. We also just hired a field representative in Guinea-Bissau, which is sort of the Galapagos of Africa. It's like incredibly biodiverse, but it's very hard to get to, which is great because that means the habitat is more intact, but it's also very impoverished. So we're going to start seeing what we can do there. In Cameroon, this is a mangrove project as well, but it's primarily solar power. And what's really impactful about this is that, we have some quotes from some people in the community who just say, my kids are reading at night. They've never really been able to read at night. And also like the associated better health because they're not burning as much wood. So that's been really pretty amazing to work in this brand new area that I hope to visit this winter. And finally, I think the Americas and Caribbean, we do some work in El Salvador and also in Guatemala. Not a whole lot of islands, but the islands that do exist are really interesting. And especially, I'm showing you El Salvador, but Guatemala is really cool because there's Caribbean islands and Caribbean culture on the East Coast and on the West Coast, the Pacific. So there's a lot of really different kinds of habitat. But there's not a lot of conservation culture there. So we're really trying to get that going. This is a sea turtle protection project. Just huge amount of sea turtles use that Pacific coast as habitat in Guatemala and El Salvador. So this was a project where we just helped improve a turtle hatchery. It's just an area where people collect the eggs, bring the eggs, they're, incubated and then released once they hatch. And this is also providing incentives for people to not collect the eggs and then sell them as food. And they've done things like, they did a turtle festival, and they're doing tours so people can come and pay to release the turtles, and that's been really successful. And it's very simple. I mean, you can see it's just a very, very simple structure, but it's really, the number of hatchlings they were releasing last year was a record high. And who doesn't like cute baby turtles? Okay, so thank you so much for listening and for having me here. And I was doing some research into your club, and I realized something, which is that my dad was the district governor of Rotary International District 7850 in 1994 and 1995, and this club was chartered in 1995. So I'm really touched to be here. I'm having a lot of feelings. I'm thinking about my dad, but thank you so much, and thank you all to your service to the community. It's really wonderful. And I'll take any questions if you have time. I'm happy to.
Yeah, we definitely have time for questions.
Yes.
So how are you funded?
Oh, yeah. Um, We're mostly funded by individual donors. We do have a philanthropic board, so our board members all have to contribute fairly significantly. They also have to try and fundraise for us. Obviously, there's varying levels of contribution in that regard, but we do have some foundation support, and that's getting a little bit more heated these days. We're getting some larger and larger grants. Last week, we were just awarded something called the Littman Prize through the University of Pennsylvania, and that's $250,000 that we weren't expecting, so that's nice. We were able last year, because of an unrestricted grant of $2 million that we weren't expecting, able to grow our staff by one person. We still only have 9 people. So it's all over the place, but we do have 2 dedicated development staff, one for individual giving and one for foundations and institutional giving. So we have to raise everything. We're not endowed. Yeah.
It seemed like there were, in each of the locations, a mix of projects that were, very environmentally focused, but then also ones that were just generally supporting the people who live there. Like, how are those chosen and how are those connected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have 2 board meetings a year, and we have this network of field representatives, and they come to us with project ideas. Like right now, we're just sifting through ideas for consideration at our June meeting. But every project, even if it is kind of more people related, community related, it has to have some kind of conservation benefit. So like when you saw the photos from the Dominican Republic, a lot of that is awareness building and just providing educational opportunities and activities that kind of enhance things like schools and community groups, but there has to be some conservation buy-in by the part of the community, if that makes sense.
Well, something like a solar project, that, there's an environmental benefit, I presume, but it seems like it maybe as much or more to bring energy that just wasn't available.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what I neglected to mention is that project was in exchange for an agreement on the part of the community to not exploit their mangrove forests. So with a lot of projects, we have a conservation agreement. So the community has to agree to protecting a certain aspect of their environment. And again, this doesn't come from us. This comes from the community because they see what the exploitation does down the road, especially when it comes to, the burning of mangrove forests and the destruction of mangrove forests and how that affects fisheries, but also affects what happens during storms. So there is an agreement in place there that has to do with mangroves. And there's a lot of consensus building around that protection. So it's both, yeah.
And for the people to actually have the option now because they didn't have. So what are we supposed to do for heat, or what are we supposed to do for cooking? You know, instead of cutting down the mangroves
Mhm.
and burning them, now they have solar.
They do, and you know, it's not perfect because there's issues with batteries and there's issues with maintenance and all that, but the technology has come so far. And basically now, like, it's so simple to just provide a solar kit and have everything there that's needed. And the maintenance is quite simple and all that. So yeah, that's really come a long way.
And awareness is huge.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, it's like, and especially when you start to work with the kids, you just see that spillover effect and how they're going home and talking about it. They're going home and, you know, these kids in Sri Lanka are going to their parents and saying, you know, a leopard just got snared by a trap that you set for a pig, you know, so let's like cut that out, you know? So, you know, our environmental education is a little bit limited, because it's not our board's favorite thing, but we do pretty much one dedicated environmental education project per board meeting. But right now, the DR is an outlier. That awareness program is an outlier, but it's been really effective. And that program would not have worked in Sri Lanka. I mean, every place is so different. But the DR, they're all about social media. They're all about, you know, the free activities and, you know, things that they can do, especially in the schools that are different. They're just not, you know, talking about everyday school subjects. These things are unusual. And also the pride of knowing, like, wow, there are humpback whales like living in the bay right near my house. Like, you know, so yeah, that's very powerful.
So it surprises me that island culture is where the greatest amount of extinction occurs. It seems intuitive that the highly populated continents would be where extinction would occur. Is that because we've already done extinction, you know, with our population and all the other crap that we do, and now it's up to the islands to try to save these animals?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about it because I think, yeah, part of it is like, you know, we've probably made enough of a mess, but also islands are because they're so small and they're so isolated, like the biodiversity is incredible. So you just think about the sheer numbers of species, like a place like Madagascar, where they're just phenomenal numbers of species. And because of, places in Indonesia where the marine biodiversity is just completely mind-blowing. Part of it is that concentration of that many species make them more vulnerable, but also it just takes one horrific event to wipe out, you know, a number of species, and they may not exist anywhere else in the earth. So, yeah.
When you have conservation agreements, and you only have a staff of 9 and 400 projects around the world, how do you monitor that, you know, that they've kept up with their end of the agreement?
That's a great question. That's where our field reps come in. So our field representatives, they're very part-time, they're contract-based, they work out of their homes. We pay for the expenses, but they, you know, they're contract workers. And they are the ones who both identify the projects and also monitor them. So we have, when a project is active, when our funding is still being used, it's a much closer monitoring system, but then we will ask for periodic check-ins in terms of, and, you know, let's face it, there's some times where, you know, something unforeseeable happens. And then, you know, so if some piece of habitat gets destroyed, we want to know about it, you know, and there's still a school and there's still a community center and, you know, there's still a benefit. So it's not, so it's heartbreaking when the conservation piece doesn't go well, but amazingly, it almost always does because the ideas come from the community. But we also don't want to say, well, this needs to be conserved forever, because it's not the place of the current leadership of the community or the current, you know, decision-making body to speak for future generations. But that's our hope.
Do they agree for like 10 years or something like that?
Yeah, we try and get a minimum of 10 years, but it's really interesting that sometimes we do get these in perpetuity requests, and if the community asks for an in perpetuity agreement, we'll honor that, so.
Do you do any work in Puerto Rico? I mean, they have lots of mangroves there also.
We do not currently have any projects there. We have just not quite been able to find the right community partner, but we do work closely with an organization there that we've done a lot of consultation with them, and there's a lot of back and forth overlap with their mangrove work, but we do not currently have projects there.
Is it harder because it's part of the United States?
Maybe. Yeah, it's definitely a little tougher. But yeah, we got a grant from an entity that wanted us and this Vieques Conservation Trust in Puerto Rico and this other organization in that region to form a Caribbean Mangrove Coalition. And we kind of don't want to go into that we don't have the bandwidth really to create a coalition, but between the three of us, we have worked closely. We went to a mangrove conference in Cartagena, Colombia last year. And so we're going to do some kind of exchange, I think, next year, where we're going to see each other's projects. So I'll probably go to Puerto Rico and try and find something for us there. Yeah. Yes.
So I saw in your presentation that there's like 9 projects in the United States. Did I
Mhm.
read that right?
Mhm.
Could you tell us just a couple of those and kind of where they are, maybe high level?
Yeah. So, the United States is hard because, there are islands, obviously, but things are very expensive here. I mean, we can build a school in Indonesia for $25,000, $30,000. It's hard to do anything here, for that amount of money and the regulatory issues and all that. Most recently, we've been doing seagrass work in the Pacific Northwest, and that's been a little bit of a departure from what we usually do because it's more funding replantation of seagrass, which is kind of in an early stage in terms of the technology, but we're helping with some of that and engaging some of the indigenous people in at a school in Washington State in that effort. We've done a couple things we did a project in the Farallon Islands in California, and that was just a bird habitat kind of project, but it's very hard to find something that fits our model here. We're certainly always open to it, but it's been a little tough. My uncle had a home on Fire Island in New York, and he always thought, Seacology should do something on Fire Island, and I was like, that's way beyond our checkbook, but yeah, so we do little interventions when we can. I would love to see us someday do something in Maine, on one of the Maine islands. Well, thank you. Oh, wait,
Sorry, one last one. Yeah, I'm just curious, if there have been any instances where you really hit resistance from a local group, or is it that you're always responding to things that they themselves are, open or want to do?
There definitely have been instances where a community there's been some kind of lack of consensus. And also one thing we really try and look out for is you can't just rely on one person or even 2 people. You have to have involvement of a broader portion of the community. Also, women are very key to that, because women are very influential in a lot of island cultures. But if we see that happening along the way, like if we approve a grant and then we see that there's some resistance or conflict, then we'll just either wait for a better time or just cancel the funding. But it does happen. It's not very common, but it does happen.
Are you the only people doing this in the world?
There's other organizations working on islands. We're very unique in that because of our funding model, are raising all the funds and then giving grants to community groups on islands throughout the world. but there is a growing number of organizations working on islands. There's a lot of really strong Pacific Island groups right now working around climate mitigation. And I'm going to a conference on Prince Edward Island next month that's island themed specifically. So they're out there, but we're pretty unique.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And basically, thank you for your presentation today on, we will donate $50 to the Williston School District mentoring program in your name.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Karen. We do have one little additional task for you, which is to draw a lottery raffle ticket.
Oh, boy.
And read the last 3 digits.
Okay.
Pick it up good.
I don't want to get the